Hey everyone, Master Rain back once again, and I'm here with an updated version of the timeline of the one-term presidents. I furthered out my research that I did in 2020 and found out there's actually 23 presidents that only served one term, 4 years or less. In addition to their presidential ordinals, political parties, presidential terms, and the elections they won and lost, I'm also going to include their life era, who their running mates were, the electoral votes each election got, and the states that they were from. And with that said, let's get this show on the road. The second president of the United States, John Adams, who lived from October 30th, 1735 to July 4th, 1826, who was born in Massachusetts, was the Federalist candidate in the 1796 election, in which he won against Thomas Jefferson, who was, however, elected as vice president despite Adams' running mate being Thomas Pinckney in the 1796 election. John Adams assumed the oath of office upon his victory in the 1796 election with 71 electoral votes against 68 for Jefferson. He got to run from March 4th, 1797 to March 4th, 1801, as he was defeated by Thomas Jefferson, his own vice president in the 1800 election, having only 65 electoral votes while Jefferson winded up with 73. He won the election with Thomas Pinckney, but lost the election with Charles Pinckney, resulting in Thomas Jefferson taking over as the third president in 1801. The sixth president of the United States, John Quincy Adams, son of John Adams, who lived from July 11th, 1767 to February 23rd, 1848, who was also born in Massachusetts, who was the Democratic-Republican candidate in the 1824 election despite having less electoral votes than Andrew Jackson, who had 99 while Adams had 84. John Quincy Adams still got to run for president from March 4th, 1825 to March 4th, 1829 due to the House of Representatives handing him the presidency prior to Inauguration Day. They both had John C. Calhoun as their running mate, who was the vice president during John Quincy Adams' presidency and Andrew Jackson's presidency. Yeah, in the 1824 election, in addition to Andrew Jackson, he also ran against William H. Crawford and Henry Clay. In the 1828 election, John Quincy Adams lost to Andrew Jackson with only 83 electoral votes, while Jackson had 178. Adams' running mate at the time was Richard Rush. The eighth president of the United States, Martin Van Buren, who lived from December 5th, 1782 to July 24th, 1862, born in New York State, was the Democratic candidate in the 1836 election and won against William Henry Harrison, Hugh White, Daniel Webster, and William P. Mangum with 170 electoral votes. Van Buren ran the oath of office from March 4th, 1837 to March 4th, 1841 with his running mate Richard M. Johnson as his vice president. He lost to William Henry Harrison in the 1840 election, who got 234 votes while Van Buren only had 60 votes. And he had no running mate at the time during that election. He also tried to run for president in the 1848 election for his second term with Charles F. Adams, but got no electoral votes. The ninth president of the United States, William Henry Harrison, who lived from February 9th, 1773 to April 4th, 1841, who was born in Virginia. He was the Whig candidate of the 1840 election, defeating his predecessor with 234 votes. His running mate was his successor, John Tyler, from March 4th to April 4th, 1841, as William Henry Harrison became the first president to die in office and has only served a month in office before he died of enteric fever. He definitely counts as a one-term president, as he definitely had no chance to make it to his second term, as he kicked the bucket just after a month in the oath of office. The 10th president of the United States, John Tyler, born on March 29th, 1790, died on January 18th, 1862, who was also born in Virginia, was a member of the Whig Party. The electoral votes in running mate are inapplicable as John Tyler had no vice president during his presidency and was not in either the 1840 election nor 1844. He did not seek a re-election and endorsed James K. Polk to the presidency for 1845. His predecessor died on April 4, 1841, but John Tyler came to Washington, D.C. on April 6, 1841 and ran for president until March 4, 1845. He was also the first vice president to inherit the oath of office. The 11th president of the United States, James Knox Polk, who lived from November 2nd, 1795 to June 15th, 1849, who was born in North Carolina and was the Democratic nominee for the 1844 election against Henry Clay, who he defeated with 170 electoral votes while Clay only had 105. Polk's running mate was George M. Dallas, and they were in the oath of office from March 4th, 1845 to March 4th, 1849. James Knox Polk turned down on the re-election for the 1848 and handed the presidency over to Zachary Taylor. The 12th president of the United States, Zachary Taylor, who lived from November 24, 1784 to July 9, 1850, and was born in Virginia. He ran as the Whig Party candidate in the 1848 election with his presidential successor, Millard Filmore, against Lewis Cass and Martin Van Buren, who was said earlier to seek re-election years after the defeat, but lost miserably. Zachary Taylor got 163 votes while Lewis Cass got 127 votes, which granted Zachary Taylor the oath of office from March 4th, 1849 until his death on July 9th, 1850 due to a really serious stomach problem. Overall, Zachary Taylor was the second president to die while in office, which led to Millard Filmore taking the oath of office. The 13th president of the United States, Millard Filmore, who lived from January 7th, 1800 to March 8th, 1874, born in New York State. He was a member of the Whig Party and was overall the second vice president to take over the oath of office after the president's death. The running mate and the elections are also inapplicable for this president, as Millard Filmore had no vice president and participated in no elections. Not even the 1852 election, as he handed the presidency over to Franklin Pierce. He was in the oath of office from July 9th, 1850 to March 4th, 1853. However, he participated in the 1856 election with Andrew J. Donaldson, but lost epically. The 14th president of the United States, Franklin Pierce, who lived from November 23rd, 1804 to October 8th, 1869, and was born in New Hampshire. Pierce was the Democratic nominee for the 1852 election, but got no renominations from the Democrats for the 1856 election, which resulted in Franklin Pierce running only from March 4th, 1853 to March 4th, 1857. He won the 1852 election with William R. King with 254 votes against Winfield Scott, who only had 42 votes. He wasn't nominated for a second term in the 1856 election, but the Democrats instead nominated James Buchanan. The 15th president of the United States, James Buchanan, who lived from April 23, 1791 to June 1, 1868, and was born in Pennsylvania, was the Democratic nominee for the 1856 election, running with John C. Breckinridge and winning with 174 electoral votes against John C. Fremont, who only had 114 votes, and Millard Filmore, who only had 8 votes. James Buchanan sought no re-election for the 1860 election, thus was in the oath of office from March 4, 1857 to March 4, 1861. The 17th president of the United States, Andrew Johnson, who was born in North Carolina, living from December 29, 1808 to July 31, 1875, was in the Democratic Party despite being Lincoln's running mate in the 1864 election and Lincoln being the Republican. Johnson assumed presidency on April 15, 1865, when John Wilkes Booth shot and killed Abraham Lincoln and was president until March 4, 1869. This is another president who had no vice president and participated in no presidential elections and handed his presidency over to Ulysses S. Grant. The 19th President of the United States, Ruther B Hayes, who was born in Ohio and lived from October 4th, 1822 to January 17th, 1893. He was the Republican nominee in the 1876 election, running with William A. Wheeler and won against Samuel J. Tilden with 185 votes, who was only one vote away from a tie. He sought no re-election in the 1880 election, thus he passed his presidency on to James Garfield. Thus, Hayes only ran the oath of office from March 4th, 1877 to March 4th, 1881. The 20th President of the United States, James A. Garfield, who was born in Ohio, lived from November 19th, 1831 to September 19th, 1881, and ran as the Republican candidate in the 1880 election with Chester Alan Arthur, winning 214 electoral votes and defeating Winfield Scott Hancock, who only had 155 votes. He was in the oath of office from March 4th, 1881 until September 19th of the same year. Thanks a lot to Charles J. Gittu, who actually shot him on July 2nd, but took over 2 months for the wound to kill him. The 21st President of the United States, Chester Alan Arthur, who was born in Vermont and lived from October 5th, 1829 to November 18th, 1886. Chester served his presidency from September 20th, 1881 to March 4th, 1885, and was part of the Republican Party. The running mate and electoral votes are not applicable as Chester had no vice president and was not nominated for the 1884 election. The 23rd President of the United States, Benjamin Harrison, who was born in Ohio, lived from August 20th, 1833 to March 13th, 1901, and whose paternal grandfather served as the 9th President, served as the Republican candidate for the 1888 election, running with Levi P. Morton, defeating Stephen Grover Cleveland in said election, having 233 electoral votes against Grover Cleveland's 168 votes, but lost by popular vote, which didn't impact his presidency. He ran with Whitelaw Reid in the 1892 election and got 145 votes. He only beat populist candidate James B. Weaver, who only had 22 electoral votes, but lost to Stephen Grover Cleveland in the 1892 election, which granted him his second term and was re-inaugurated as the 24th president after losing as the 22nd. Benjamin Harrison only ran the White House from March 4th, 1889 to March 4th, 1893 as a result. The 27th President of the United States, William Howard Taft, was born in Ohio and lived from September 15th, 1857 to March 8th, 1930. He was the Republican candidate in the 1908 election, running with James S. Sherman, winning with 321 votes against William Jennings Bryan, who only had 162 votes, and he ran the oath of office from March 4th, 1909 to March 4th, 1913, until he lost to Woodrow Wilson in the 1912 election, who had 435 electoral votes, while Taft only had 8 electoral votes, running with Nicholas Butler instead of James S. Sherman, and Theodore Roosevelt, the Progressive Party, at the time with 88 electoral votes, and also the Socialist nominee Eugene V. Debs lost miserably with no electoral votes. The 29th President of the United States, Warren G. Harding, was born in Ohio. He was the Republican nominee for the 1920 election, running with Calvin Coolidge, defeating James M. Cox with 404 electoral votes against his 127. He was the president from March 4th, 1921, and lived from November 2nd, 1865 until August 2nd, 1923, when he died of a heart attack, resulting in Calvin Coolidge to take over the White House. The The 31st President of the United States, Herbert Hoover, was born in Iowa and lived from August 10, 1874 to October 20, 1964. He was the Republican candidate for the 1928 election, running with Charles Curtis, beating Al Smith with 444 electoral votes, while Al had 87, resulting in Herbert Hoover resuming office from March 4, 1929 to March 4, 1933, as he lost in the 1932 election to Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had 472 electoral votes, while Hoover only had 59. The 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was born in Massachusetts. He was the Democratic nominee in the 1960 election, running with Lyndon B. Johnson, and was elected with 303 votes against Richard Nixon, who only had 219 votes. John F. Kennedy was born on May 29, 1917, assumed office on January 20, 1961, and was the president until he was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald on November 22, 1963, resulting in Lyndon B. Johnson taking over the White House. The 38th President of the United States, Gerald Ford, was born in Nebraska and lived from July 14, 1913 to December 26, 2006. He was a Republican, sworn in as president on August 9, 1974, following Nixon's resignation, and eventually had Nelson Rockefeller as his vice president. He ran in the 1976 election against Jimmy Carter with Bob Dole, but lost to Jimmy Carter with 240 electoral votes, while Carter had 297. Ford was president from August 9, 1974 until January 20, 1977. The 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, was born in Georgia and has been known as the longest-lived former president in modern times. He was born on October 1, 1924, and died not so long ago. Died on December 29, 2024, at the age of 100 years and 89 days after nearly 2 years in hospice care. He was the Democratic nominee in the 1976 and 1980 elections, running with Walter Mondale. He ran as the president from January 20th, 1977 until January 20th, 1981, as he won in the 1976 election with 297 votes against Gerald Ford, but lost in the 1980 election to Ronald Reagan, who had 489 votes against him, and John B. Anderson, who was a nonpartisan candidate and had no electoral votes, while Carter only had 49 votes. The 41st President of the United States, George H.W. Bush, was born in Massachusetts and lived for 94 years from June 12, 1924 to November 30th, 2018. He was the Republican candidate in the 1988 election, running with Dan Quayle and winning with 426 electoral votes against Michael Dukakis, who only had 111 votes, but sought his re-election in the 1992 election, but only beat the nonpartisan third candidate Ross Perot, who had no electoral votes, but lost to Bill Clinton with only 168 votes, weak against Clinton's 370 votes. Thus ran for president from January 20th, 1989 to January 20th, 1993. Finally, we reach Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States, who was born on November 20th, 1942 in Pennsylvania and is still alive. In fact, he's the only one-term president that's still alive. He was previously the vice president under Obama's presidency and served as the Democratic nominee for the stressful 2020 election, running with Kamala Harris in said election, defeating Donald Trump with 306 electoral votes, while Trump only had 232. Biden withdrew himself from the 2024 election and only served from January 20th, 2021 to January 20th, 2025. Biden dropping out of the 2024 election led to his own running mate Kamala Harris losing the election to Trump, who becomes the Republican counterpart of Stephen Grover Cleveland due to having his re-election in a similar fashion. It's honestly weird how America counts their presidents, as Trump is being considered the 47th president for his second term after being the 45th during his first term. That wraps up the whole timeline of the one-term presidents, which actually turned out there to be 23 of them, not just 10 because of losing an election for their second consecutive term. but 13 more who only served one term for other reasons. And before I conclude this video, who do you think will run in the 2028 election, and who will you vote for? Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know in the comments whether it's good news or bad news to you that Trump got to resume to the oath of office after losing to Biden. As always, I will see you next time on the 82nd video of the Master Rainey channel. This is Master Rainey signing off. See you next time.